Chapter 2. A Growing Mind. It was in the middle of the year of 1998, and summer rolled around. My parents, my older brother and I were still living in my grandmother's house on Cherryfield Road. Our living space was the basement. My grandmother's basement wasn't like your ordinary basement. Her basement was huge. It had a bathroom with a shower, its own living room space, a personal bedroom where my parents slept, a huge boiler room that had a washing machine, a dryer, and storage freezer. Just to top it all off, the whole basement carpet floor was the color of blood red. I've never seen anything like that. I spent most of that summer in the house with my father. We would go outside, and I would sit on the front porch and watch him wash his car. Sometimes I would sit in the driver's seat with the door closed and watch as he hosed the car down with water, going all around the car. He would allow me to hose the car down at times, but I was so little that I wasn't able to control the force of the hose when it would shoot out water. So I would accidentally spray my dad with water a little bit. Then he would grab my hand as I'm holding the hose, and we would hose the car down together. Afterwards, my pops for some reason always took pictures of his cars after he would wash them. He would always take pictures of me in the car seat pretending to drive like him, or a picture of me on the hood of the car. After a while, I started to realize that my father loved cars. Even after he would pick me up from daycare, he would take me to a car repair shop out in Forestville that was owned by my grandfather Gladstone Sr. on my father's side. At the shop, I would always see a bunch of cars laying around. Broken down cars, rusty old cars, cars on cinder blocks with no wheels, and cars that they would sell for a couple of $1,000s. We used to go by my grandfather's shop every weekend. After visiting my grandfather, we would head home. It was crazy living in my grandmother's house. The house was packed. Along with my family living with my grandmother, there was also my Uncle A. Gay who lived there. He was the older brother of my mother. He didn't stay too long. During that summer, my big cousin Darnell came down to live with us for a year, as if the house wasn't already packed. He was the son of my Uncle A. Gay. I didn't really know my cousin Darnell like that until he came and lived with my grandmother that year. Darnell was goofy as hell. He used to love playing tricks on people. Darnell and my older brother Tyrell used to love hiding out in the basement, making creepy noises in random places, and popping out to scare me. I couldn't stand when they did that. They used to make me cry and tease me for being so scared. Sometimes they would tease me all day. Darnell and my brother Tyrell were basketball players. Whenever I played ball with them, they would always make fun of my height and try to make me jump for the ball while they held it high in the air. They never did play fair. They both at one point actually played on their own school basketball team. Hell, my father actually coached my older brother's team, and we would go to my brother's games to watch him play. We even went to Darnell's games at times. Eventually I got used to him at that point in time. Darnell wasn't so bad. We had some good times too. Around that same year of 98, a new rapper had emerged. A rough, rugged dude named DMX. He had just come out with his song, The Rough Riders Anthem. Whenever that song came on, or the music video appeared on TV, Cousin Darnell would wrap a bandana over my head and take me to perform in front of the whole family. Darnell would say, Yo, everybody, check this out. Me and Aaron got something to show you. Come here, Aaron. Then I would walk out from behind Darnell and then stand close right beside him with his hands around my shoulders. He'd say, "Yo, Aaron could rap. He be acting like DMX. Watch this." My mother would be like, "Donnell, why do you have my baby wearing a bandana over his head? You know better than that." "No, I'm just saying, Aunt Boo, Uncle Adam, just watch. I'm telling you, he could rap like DMX. He be singing the lyrics, barking, all that. Yo, Aaron, show everybody what you got, son." Then I start rapping the lyrics. I was a shy boy back then, so I sang the song with my head down and stood still. Darnell then said, No, that's not how you was doing it downstairs in the basement. Come on, show 'em what you were doing in the basement. Come on, I'll sing with you." We would start singing together. "Stop, drop, shut 'em down, open up shop. Oh, no, that's a rough rider's road." Darnell would stop singing along and allow me to sing by myself, because by then I had loosened up. Then I started getting grimy with it. I began to scream, shout, bark, move, and rap like I was DMX. "Stop, drop, shut 'em down, open up shop. Whoa, no, that's a rough rider's road. Snitches wanna cry, snitches wanna lie. Get at me, dog. Where my dog's at?" My family would smile and laugh their butts off. They couldn't believe that I was acting like DMX. Cousin Darnell loved when I did that. After I would perform in front of a bunch of my family members, Darnell would say, "See, Uncle Adam, see, Aunt Boo, I told you, he's DMX, he's DMX. That's my little cousin, I love that boy." When he said Uncle Adam and Aunt Boo, he was referring to my parents. Darnell called them by their nicknames, Adam and Betty Boo. My mother would respond, "Darnell, you are too silly." My father would just look at us with a smirk on his face and shaking his head like, "My crazy nephew got my little boy screaming, hollering, and barking like a dog, like he don't have no sense." Those were the times when it seemed like everything was just peachy with my family. Like everything was just right. The house, the atmosphere, the people around me, it seemed so perfect. But I would soon learn that there is no such thing as a perfect family. There were times my father would spend time with me before he put me to bed. We would watch sports, play Sega Genesis, or watch movies. Most of the time, we just watched the movie Toy Story. That was our favorite movie at the time. We watched it constantly. After our time together, my pops would sing the song, "You Got a Friend in Me," which was the theme song to Toy Story. He would sing that song to me as he would tuck me into bed. Sometimes, our time together would be ruined because my mother would come and ask my father if she could speak to him in private in their bedroom. Sometimes he would go, and other times he wouldn't even budge. But when he did go and talk with my mother, they would close the bedroom door, and I would be left alone to watch the movie by myself. I would wait anxiously for my father to come back and finish spending time with me. As I would wait, I began to hear my parents' voice get louder and louder after a couple of minutes. Minutes turned into an hour or two. There were times my father would miss the whole movie because him and my mother were arguing. I would just sit there, listen, and wait, even after I watched the movie from beginning to the end, by myself. Just hoping they would stop. Nah, they would just keep going. I would have to knock on their bedroom door and tell my father that the movie was over just to make them stop for a moment. After I tell my pops the movie's over, he would come out pick me up, put my pajamas on, tuck me into bed, and give me a forehead goodnight kiss. Then I would watch my father walk into the bedroom and close the door. Then they would continue to argue. I was forced to hear the nonsense while I was trying to sleep. Even though I didn't know what they were yelling about, it still felt weird to me. It was a new and awkward feeling that I didn't like, but a feeling I would have to get used to soon. If you ask me, my parents hollering and cussing at each other was my new lullaby. One day after my pops picked me up from daycare, he took me along to go see his best friend Reggie. Afterwards, we took a little drive around town. During the drive, my pops said, "Aaron, I got something to tell you." "Okay," I said. "Guess what?" he said. "What?" "I'm looking for a new place to stay," he said. "For the whole family? Are we moving?" I asked. "No," I said, "I'm looking for a new place. I'm moving out, Aaron," he said. "Why? How are we going to spend time together?" I said. I started to ask all these questions to my dad, and his response was, "Relax, Aaron. I'll still be close to you. I'm still looking at places and apartments that's right down the street from your grandmother's house. Besides, we can still spend time together. I'm still going to pick you up from daycare, and once I get straight with finding a place of my own, you're coming to spend the weekend with me." At that time, I didn't understand any of this. Why would my own father look for a new place to stay and not take his own family with him? I was extremely baffled by all of this. I didn't know the real reason why because, hell, I was only 4 years old. In my pop's eyes, I was still just a baby to him and didn't need to know the reason at that time. After our little conversation, my pops and I went to 7-Eleven to get us some Slurpees and chips. It was summertime and hot as hell, especially if you wearing shorts, sitting on all black leather cushioned seats in a BMW. That would leave your ass burning. After my father moved out, it was kinda weird to get used to. He sometimes hung around the house a little longer, just to tuck me into bed at night. Then, he would leave the house and go lay his head wherever he chose to rest at that night. It was awkward for me, not having him around the house as much. No one to play ball with, or no one to play games with. Sure, I had my older brother, but he would always want to be by himself. He didn't really give me much attention. Sometimes I would get really lonely because my older brother would spend the weekend with his biological father. So that would just leave me and my mother. So I had to find ways to occupy myself on my own. Rather if it was me playing basketball by myself or just watching TV by myself. Even though my dad wasn't around that much, we still had family trips and events in which my father came along and attended. It seemed like even through my parents' drama, we still seemed like a solid family. Well, or so I thought. The first event that I could remember was a family wedding between a family cousin named Wayne Frisbee and his bride-to-be, Wendy. It was a special day for them, obviously. And I guess for me too, because they made me ring bearer. I remember arriving at the church, all dressed up, and walking along with my mother, with my older brother behind us walking alongside my grandparents. My father would arrive a few minutes after us. Long before the wedding started, my mother took me along with her to a dressing room where all females and bridesmaids were at. She took me there because I had to get all my supplies and everything ready for me to carry the wedding rings. After I was settled, my mom told me to go take a seat on the couch that they had on the other side of the room. I was just sitting there with the ring bearer pillow and watched as these women would just gossip and talk for a long period of time. It was almost time for the ceremony to start, so the ladies had me leave the room. A little while after, I was with my father, just watching him speak with Reggie and other family members. The wedding was outside of the church on a small hill. A few moments before the wedding started, I told my dad that I was scared to go out there and stand in front of people. He responded by saying, "Don't worry about it, Aaron. Everything is going to be fine. You'll have Reggie looking after you. Just stand by Reggie after you give him the rings. You'll do good." Reggie was one of the best men for Wayne's wedding. Even though my father told me that Reggie was going to be looking after me, I still was nervous. It was that time. The wedding began. The music started playing and everyone was seated. My family was sitting in the first 2 rows of chairs on the right side. All the best men and bridesmaids came out first. Then the flower girl went out. Then I was next right after the flower girl. All I had to do was carry a ring on a pillow to the altar. I was nervous as hell walking down that aisle, with every single one's eyeballs all on me. But I managed to get myself together and pulled it off. After walking the aisle, I stood right next to Reggie like my father told me to. Then the lovely bride came out, walking down the aisle to her husband-to-be. The ceremony seemed like it took forever. Not only that, it was a hot summer day and everyone was wearing suits. That definitely don't mix well. I was so hot and tired of standing still, just holding that pillow up, that I started to lean on Reggie and rest my head on his hip while he had his hand over my left shoulder. I was finally able to give Reggie the ring so he could give it to Wayne. Then Wendy and Wayne finally jumped the broom. After doing my thing as a ring bearer, I spent most of my time with my dad. He would just have conversations with people in the church lobby while everyone else partied at the wedding reception. It was the time he was carrying me and I fell asleep on his shoulder because it was so hot. My father didn't stay long. He wasn't planning to stay for the reception. Even after the bride and groom, Wendy and Wayne begged him to stay. Everyone and their mama wanted my father to stay for the reception, but he chose to leave. Cousin Reggie walked with my father out to his car. Pops told me that he was leaving and that he wasn't staying. I also begged him to stay, or begged him to allow me to go with him. "No, I gotta go. Go with Reggie. He'll look after you, alright?" He gave Reggie £1 and got in the car. I watched him drive off and went back inside the church with Reggie to the reception. Even though my parents were at the wedding together, it still felt divided. I was soon about to find out how divided they was. A few days later, my father came to me and told me that he finally found a new apartment. He seemed pretty happy for himself. "Hey Aaron, guess what? I finally got a new apartment, and you're coming over tonight to spend the weekend with me," he said. "Really? I'm glad. I can't wait. But don't I have to ask Mommy first?" I said. "Ask your mother for what? You and your brother are my sons too. If I want my sons for the weekend, then I'm going to have my sons for the weekend. You said you wanted to spend the night on the weekends with me, right?" he said. "Yes," I said. "Alright then. Then that's what we gonna do." Later on that night, at my grandmother's house, my father was getting my things ready for me to spend the weekend with him. My father also invited my older brother Tyrell to come and spend the weekend with us. but my brother refused. A few moments later, my parents struck up a heated conversation. During the process of packing my things, I watched as my parents talked back to each other, gaining bass in their voice with every sentence that came out their mouth. The conversation turned into an argument immediately. They were arguing about the fact that I was spending the weekend with my dad. "I don't understand what the problem is," my dad said. "You had the boys for a week. It's only fair that I have them for the weekend. That's only 2 days. Aaron said he wanted to spend the nights on the weekends with me, and I promised him that we was going to spend the weekends together. It's just that plain and simple." My mother was like, "Well, why isn't Tyrell going with y'all? What about him? How come you just taking Aaron?" "I asked Tyrell if he wanted to come, and he said no. He didn't want to come," my dad shouted. "Well, that's not fair," Mom said. "You can't just take one and not the other. That don't make sense just to take Aaron. That's not fair to Tyrell." "Betty, I'm not going to force the boy," Dad said. "He said he wanted to stay here. If he doesn't want to go, fine by me. Then he doesn't have to go." "That's still unfair," Mom said. "You either have to take both of them or don't take them at all." My dad told me to pack up the Sega Genesis to take with us so we could play it over the weekend. My older brother had just got the new Nintendo 64, so it wasn't like he was without a game console. After I finished packing up everything we needed, I walked over and stood in front of my parents as they were still arguing. "Look, I don't got time for this foolishness right now, Betty," my dad said. "Aaron, you ready to go?" I said bye to my mother and walked off with my dad while he held my hand. That was the first time I ever saw my parents actually argue in front of me. It was disturbing to watch. It's one thing to hear them, but it's another to actually see them. My pops and I finally arrived at his new apartment. It wasn't big, but it was good enough for him. It had a small kitchen right next to the living room and one bedroom that only had his bed, a small dresser with a 14-inch Sony TV on top, a closet, and a bathroom. It was cool spending the weekends with my pops. My older brother Tyrell would sometimes spend the night with us, but it wasn't often for him. When my pops sometimes got off early from work, he would pick my brother and I up from daycare, take us to get snacks, and go straight to his apartment. My mother used to get angry whenever my father did that. We would only spend like an hour or two there because my parents would argue over the phone about the situation. Then, my pops would tell us that he's dropping us off at our grandmother's house because our mother didn't want us at his apartment. I would get mad when we had to leave. Oh well. A few weeks later, my whole family took a trip down to North Carolina for a family reunion. We had to rent a van so the whole family could go. My father was the driver. During the drive down to North Carolina, my pops got pulled over by a state trooper. I don't know the reason why he got pulled over. All I know is that we were there for a good 30 minutes. We later arrived to North Carolina late that afternoon. We checked into a hotel and went back out to visit some family members. It was my first trip down there and my first time meeting that side of the family. My grandfather on my mother's side was from North Carolina, so a majority of them was related to him. It took a little bit of time for me to get used to these new faces. Everyone immediately took a liking towards me because I was the baby of the family. I don't remember much from that trip. All I remember is a little bit of what I did at the reunion the next night. Most of the time, the new family members I had just met just have me sit on their lap while they have conversations with other people. Later on, my father took me to go take some pictures with him, along with his best friend Reggie and Reggie's sons Q. Everyone took their pictures by the stage that was in the room, so that's where we took pictures at. We took about 2 or 3 pictures. Then my mother and other family members took their own pictures. After that, we headed back to the hotel. My pops carried me up to the room because I was already asleep. That was our last night in North Carolina before heading back to Maryland. It was getting near the end of the summer, and we had one big family trip to go on. For the last trip, we planned to go to Disney World in Orlando Studios in Florida. We were planning this trip for weeks on end. My aunt, uncles, cousin Donnell, and grandmother attended. We had to fly to get over there. It was my first time flying, and I was kind of scared. Plus, I couldn't sit still. I sat next to my pops, and my older brother sat next to our mother. When the plane started to ascend, my ears started to hurt. They felt like they were going to explode. I couldn't stand that feeling. I thought I was going deaf. I started to hold both my ears and said to my dad, "Daddy, my ears hurt." "They're supposed to hurt," my dad said. "Mine are hurting too. Don't worry, it should stop hurting in a little bit." Once the plane was above altitude, my pop sat me on his lap to calm me down some. Back then, I didn't realize that when you're on a plane, you begin to leave the Earth's atmosphere, which means there's less oxygen and more pressure. So your ears start to close up and tighten to reduce the pressure until you get above the altitude. Once we landed in Florida, we checked into the Disney resort. They had townhouses you could stay in that was right on the premises of Disney World. We had a townhouse right on the lake where they had all kinds of birds in the water. My older brother and I took pictures on the deck right by the water. We went everywhere in Disney World. We went to the Disney Castle. We met Woody and Buzz from Toy Story. Saw the Disney Parade. Saw the Muppets perform. Watched the fireworks, etc., etc. We did everything there that was to do at Disney World. Most of the time we was there, my parents didn't really speak to each other that much. Whenever we was at the resort house, my pops would always have his headphones over his head playing music on his CD player, not wanting to be bothered. He was like that for most of the trip, but he only did that when we weren't out and about at the Disney park. Other than that, it was a really cool experience for the whole family. Disney World and Orlando Studios was the last family trip for that summer. Now was the time for me to enroll in school as a kindergartner.